Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk. It's rather a personal, let's say, story, how actually I try to persevere the COVID pandemics and some of the strategies or insights that I came up with during the COVID. So it's going to be a bit personal. Who am I? My name is Dastan. I was born and raised in Kyrgyzstan, but currently I live in Germany. Professionally, I started from graphic design, later moved to front-end development. I studied both things, graphic design and software engineering. And also I'm LGBT activist. A few years ago, I started a campaign called Pink Summits. We are a community of LGBT mountaineers and rock climbers trying to raise the visibility of LGBT. And we started also a project of climbing the highest mountains of each continent. And before the pandemics, we have done several of them, including Elbrus. It's the highest mountain of Europe. It's in Russia, near Chechnya, where unfortunately people like us are tortured and killed in the prisons. Yeah. So the point of that project in general was to bring visibility around LGBT through mountaineering and rock climbing. And here I am at the rock climbing trip. The pandemic in 2002, it started really, really harsh. I had multiple challenges coming up. First of all, my sister moved to Berlin in 2020, and I had to help her with the bureaucracy. And German bureaucracy is a real hell. Yeah, you have to. First of all, the foreigners office, we had to get a visa for her. And I also, as a student back then, when I was getting a visa, it was a challenge. So I was standing at night at 4 a.m. in order to get a waiting number. And with that waiting number, I could get another waiting number in the morning. So it was challenging, and I had to help her with the transition, with finding work and so on. And then my parents came right before the pandemic for a week, and it was nice. I was looking forward to it, but then suddenly the COVID happened, and there was no flight back to Kyrgyzstan. And they had to stay for 3 months. And unlike probably here in Europe, the relationship with my parents is a bit different. It's expected from me, and I mean, there is no other way around to help them financially. Yeah. So that means that I had to take care of a place where they have to live. I have to take care of food, everything, entertainment, and most importantly, of the bureaucracy, because I had only this 1 week visa. I had to prolong it. I had to take care of the medical insurance and so on. And you could imagine how much of stress I got during those months, and especially as a part-time working person and as a student. And then for the first time in my life, I failed an exam. That never happened to me. And I blamed myself for not concentrating on my studies, for not focusing on it. So it was quite a terrible situation. And on top of that, in the end of April and May, I was, I had to leave my job because of the COVID. I was working as a front-end developer, part-time, and the thing is that all my colleagues went into that government-assisted program when they get a partial, so to say, salary and they don't go to work. But I was not entitled to it because I'm a foreigner, so I had to leave. And you can imagine my situation, yeah? Without money, without with the problems at university, with my parents there, and on top of that, I was expecting, because I was in a relationship back then, and I shared all those challenges that I faced, and I didn't really get any support from my ex-partner. I decided to leave the relationship. So, and since we were living together, I had to move out and find a place to live as well. And as I mentioned during the Pink Summits campaign, we were going every year to the highest mountains of every continent. And in 2020, we planned Mont Blanc. And of course, it was canceled. Travel was not possible. And also I stopped doing any sports, and it also affected, of course, my psychological well-being, because it was a disaster year for me. It was the worst year. And another big thing was coming is winter. And as I already mentioned, the winters in Berlin are sometimes quite depressing. And I was afraid that, it will get only worse. So I felt like I'm in a black hole that sucked me, and like I could not really get out of the situation. But then I decided, okay, let's solve all my issues one by one, divide and conquer all the challenges I have. And I tried to do it, starting, of course, from my family. I booked the tickets back in June. It was possible for my parents to fly back. It was probably the most expensive ticket that I booked back to Kyrgyzstan, my home country. I helped my sister. She found a job I think in summer 2020. We were looking for a place to live. I personally switched several probably apartments, and and it is also another disaster in Berlin as a foreigner to find an accommodation. And with my studies, luckily, because of the COVID, that failed exam was not considered to be failed. And but I made a clear plan. Okay, when I want to finish what I have to do to finish my studies, and I tried to stick to it. For the job, of course, I immediately started to look for other jobs. The company that fired me told me that I'm allowed to work with them on a freelance basis. So, but as a student, to get a special freelance status on top in Germany with that bureaucratic system is almost impossible. But I tried to fight through that. And I was trying also to find new clients, new jobs, and to continue working as a front-end developer. And then winter, I was afraid of winter. That's why I decided then in the end to move to the Canaries for a few months. And probably it was the best decision I've ever taken, at least the best decision of 2020. Because I could first avoid the winter, I could still work, could still finish my studies remotely, but at the same time, most importantly, to work on my well-being, especially psychological well-being. So what happened then after all those challenges? So I have now stronger ties to my family, thanks to mutual support. I finished my studies finally in computer science at Free University in Berlin. I was able to get that freelance special thing on top of my student visa, and got multiple even freelance jobs. And recently I got even full-time employed, and I can still do my previous freelance projects that I have to finish. So that's how I try to negotiate with the current employer that I can keep my freelance things going on. And then my freelance student visa, so to say, moved into Blue Card, which is a better residence permit for the whole European Union that gives more possibilities. Last year, I was able to run Berlin Marathon, but most importantly, I was able to find my love, and that happened on the Canary Islands, in fact. And with my new partner, I was able to ascend Mont Blanc. He happens to be also a mountaineer. And here we are on top of Mont Blanc, of the highest mountain of Europe, together kissing with the rainbow flag. So this year, like 2020 was like the harshest year probably in my life, but the next year was one of the best, definitely. And this is how my state was going through the pandemics. I felt it's actually a graphic of the international seat capacity of the flights of air companies, and you can see how it dropped, and then gradually started to grow back. And this is how I also, so to say, persevered the pandemic. So it was like a huge drop when I felt that I'm a complete failure, and then trying to build up gradually, and coming back to normal. Let's talk about remote freelance work a bit. What kind of challenges and insights I got from it. Of course, I got a lot of distractions, especially on the Canary Islands. I needed discipline, and there are many tools that help it, but to build that discipline, to not to distract yourself, including blocking social media or analyzing your screen time, but they don't need help me. Yeah. And two things that actually help me is like planning through goals, short-term and long-term planning. And I try to keep as simple as possible. Yeah. And my calendar. And if anytime when I have a new goal, let's say to learn a new kind of library, a JavaScript library, then I immediately put in a calendar and book the time slots. And also, like especially it's good for regular events like jogging twice a week. And sometimes, of course, I don't do that. I'm quite lazy one week, in the other, but I know that in the third week, I'm gonna see it in the calendar again, that reminder, and I will go out and go jogging. Also, I realized during working remotely that social work life is actually not important for me. I really didn't miss that aspect of going to lunch together with my former colleagues or anything like that. But what I really missed was the communication delays. Yeah, when you write on Slack, I wanted this, and then hopefully you will get the same day, but in fact, sometimes it happens then the next day. So the delay actually made me a bit probably less even productive. And the focus, yeah. Unlike the offline meetings, online, I try to multitask, for instance, yeah, on the dailies or weeklies, and eat something at the same time. So it was not that much of focus, especially during the meetings, and that's not good for the communications. Also, I realized, because I'm still in the beginning of my career, that working remotely is probably not good for juniors, because you have a lot of questions in the beginning of the career. And online communication is not the best way to tackle it. Yeah, sometimes you need a pair programming. Sometimes you just want to reach out to your colleague and ask a short question. And remote work, I believe, is not the best thing for that. And finding work-life balance was still tricky. even though people believe that remote work brings better work-life balance. But in my situation, it was that I was lazy one days and not doing anything, and on the other days overworking completely. But in general, I could say that I got more productive while working remotely, because I knew, like, okay, in the afternoon, I want to go hiking, for instance. That's why I have only 3 hours. Yeah, and in those 3 hours, I could do work that I usually did in 5 hours, so to say. Sometimes I still hear from friends of mine who work as developers that their employers are quite hesitant about remote work still. And especially they're hesitant about the question of productiveness. They're not sure whether their employees are productive during the remote work. And then you can ask if your employees, for instance, hesitant as well, or is against the remote work. You can ask, how do you know that we are productive in the office? Yeah. So how do you measure it? What is productiveness? Yeah? And in fact, when I was also looking for jobs last year, many companies were putting remote work as an extra benefit, but I believe it's actually a must. Yeah, because despite of the challenges that we face in remote work, it brings a lot of positive things: flexibility, life-work balance. It saves costs, but most importantly, it's also a question of trust. That's why I believe that remote work belongs to a modern work culture, and it shouldn't be negotiable. What other insights and lessons I learned from the pandemic? I learned to reach out and to ask for help, and to be vulnerable. For instance, with my sister, I was like kind of always a big brother, and I was kind of hesitant to reach to her and to ask for her help from her. And this pandemic was the first time when I did it. Yeah. So and how I learned it. So I believe it's important to learn that and to do that, especially when you feel in those moments like a bit vulnerable. I also learned to value my time with my family and beloved ones. Probably many of you did, because the COVID showed us how our lives are can be affected by diseases, and anything can happen. So I put much more effort into it. And another thing is like focus. I learned to focus, and to thanks to that, to build my discipline. And this is also thanks to a best friend of mine who always says focus, focus, and focus. And not only at work, but also in personal life. Yeah, focus on a relationship, focus on your studies, finish it, make it done. Another thing that I learned from the pandemics is that our problems are relative. So in 2020, I believe that my situation is probably the worst ever. Yeah, so I thought, I can't get out from that thing. However, I also learned, thanks to also my family, to be thankful for what I have, and to see that everything in a global perspective. Yeah, to relativize your problems. And finally, also thanks to my new boyfriend, I learned how also to work on relationship. We do, for instance, the exercises, not what you think, but the partner exercises, asking questions and things like that. And I think it's very good lesson from the pandemics. And and the most important is like that I learned is to continue to think about future, continue to dream, even if you believe that you're stuck in a black hole, because maybe it's not a black hole, maybe it's a wormhole to another universe with the new possibilities and another future that you do not expect. Thank you. Please keep in touch with me through social media. Also, GitHub and GitHub is also the same, Dastanik. And please follow us on Pink Summits and support us on our campaign.